It happened so quickly that my brain barely had time to register what was going on. One moment I was walking through the local department store with Max, my loyal therapy dog, quietly trotting beside me in his bright blue vest that clearly read, "Do not pet service animal," and the next, this woman, probably in her late 40s, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, clutching a flashy designer purse like it contained state secrets, marched straight toward us with an expression of pure disgust. Without a single word of warning, she swung her foot and actually kicked at Max. The sharp sound of her shoe connecting with the floor made Max flinch, yelp softly, and press himself tightly against my leg, his tail tucked in fear. My chest tightened instantly, not just because someone dared to be cruel to him, but because Max isn't just a dog. He's my lifeline in public, the one who helps me keep my anxiety and PTSD under control. Before I could even open my mouth to explain, she cut across me with this smug, self-satisfied smirk, as if she had just saved the store from some terrible plague. "I'm a paying customer," she snapped loudly, her voice carrying across the aisles, "and I don't have to shop with your dirty dog here." She then spun toward the nearest store employee and, in the most entitled tone imaginable, demanded they remove me immediately, as though she owned the place. The young cashier froze, glancing nervously between us, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. I felt my hands clench, but I bit back my first reaction, trying to keep calm for Max's sake. Unbeknownst to her, her entire little performance was already being documented, not just by the store's overhead security cameras, but by at least 2 curious shoppers who had their phones up, recording the whole ugly scene. At that moment, I had no idea that those recordings would end up playing a massive role in what happened next, but I knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. The young cashier looked completely trapped between wanting to cry and wanting to vanish into the floor, her hands fidgeting nervously as she tried to maintain composure. In a calm but shaky voice, she said, "Ma'am, service animals are allowed by law," hoping that would end the confrontation, but Karen's face twisted into something between outrage and disbelief. She raised her voice even higher, practically shouting across the store about fake service dogs and how people like me ruin it for real disabled people. The accusation hit me like a slap, not because it was true, it wasn't, but because of the sheer ignorance behind it. I wanted to fire back and explain exactly why Max was with me, how he was trained, how vital he was for my health, but I knew engaging with her rage could make things worse. Meanwhile, Max stood glued to my leg, his body language calm but alert, the result of years of training to ignore distractions, even when those distractions were as loud and hostile as this woman. Her voice carried far beyond our aisle, and I noticed a small crowd beginning to gather, shoppers pausing with baskets in hand, whispering to each other, some shaking their heads in disbelief. A few people had already raised their phones, recording every second. Karen, however, seemed to thrive on the attention, like this was her big moment. She suddenly reached out, grabbed Max's leash, and gave it a tug toward the store's entrance as if she had the authority to evict him herself. That was the breaking point for a tall man from the electronics department who stepped forward and, in a firm but steady tone, told her to let go. For a split second, she looked startled, then shoved the leash away like it was covered in filth, muttering under her breath about how she was going to call the police and have this faker removed. Little did she realize, she was the one building her own case for trouble, and every second of it was being caught from multiple angles. The store manager arrived like a calm storm, tall and composed, radiating the kind of authority that makes everyone instantly take notice. She walked right up to Karen and in a steady, firm voice said, "Ma'am, you need to step away from our customer." For a split second, Karen looked caught off guard, but then she puffed herself up like she was inflating with self-importance and launched into yet another tirade, this time ranting about disgusting animals being allowed in stores and how it was somehow a violation of her rights as a paying customer. The manager didn't flinch. She turned to me, asked if I was okay, and then calmly but clearly told Karen that not only was she going against store policy, but she was also breaking federal law under the Americans with Disabilities Act by interfering with a service animal. The moment she said the word law, I noticed a flicker of hesitation in Karen's eyes, like a tiny crack in her wall of confidence, but it vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. "That's ridiculous! He's lying! That's not even a real service dog!" she barked, her voice dripping with defiance. The manager glanced back at me, her expression giving nothing away, and asked if I wanted to involve the police. I didn't even hesitate before saying yes, not because I wanted revenge, but because people like her shouldn't be able to harass service animal owners without consequences. Karen's face twisted like she couldn't believe I had actually agreed, but she had no idea she was already in far deeper trouble than she realized. Between the store's security cameras and the multiple customers recording her on their phones, the evidence of her behavior wasn't just solid, it was undeniable. Every cruel word, every aggressive gesture, and even that kick aimed at Max was already preserved from multiple angles, ready to be shown to anyone who needed to see exactly how she had acted. The police arrived within minutes, their presence immediately shifting the atmosphere from tense to dead serious. 2 officers walked in, their faces calm but watchful, and asked me to explain exactly what happened. I spoke clearly, my voice steady, telling them how Karen had approached me unprovoked, kicked at Max, yelled at me, and even tried to grab his leash. Before I could get too far, Karen jumped in, waving her arms and launching into a wild, exaggerated story about how I had threatened her with my dog, making herself sound like the innocent victim. The store manager didn't waste a second. She simply raised her hand toward the security room and said, "We have everything on video." That was the moment Karen's confident mask started to crack, just slightly, but she still tried to look unfazed as we all walked into the small office. The screen lit up with footage from multiple angles, and there it was in high definition, Karen storming up to me, the kick aimed at Max, her face twisted in anger, her hand grabbing the leash, her shouting and ignoring repeated warnings to stop. The officers' neutral expressions hardened instantly, their eyes locked on the screen, and when the video finished, one of them turned to her with a tone that left no room for argument. "Ma'am, interfering with a service animal is a criminal offense. That can mean serious fines and even jail time." Her jaw dropped and she stammered, "But I didn't," only for the officer to cut her off with a sharp, "It's all on video." The sound of him reading her rights filled the room, and the disbelief on her face deepened as the reality sank in. They cuffed her right there, ignoring her sputtered protests about fake service dogs, and led her out of the office toward the front of the store. By the time we stepped back into the main aisle, the same crowd that had watched the confrontation earlier was now gathered again, silent and wide-eyed, watching Karen, once so loud and smug, being escorted out in handcuffs, her voice reduced to a bitter mumble. A few weeks after the incident, I received a call from one of the officers who had responded that day. He told me that Karen's case had already been processed, and that while she wasn't new to causing public disturbances, this was the first time she had actually crossed into criminal territory. The court had fined her heavily, ordered her to attend mandatory sensitivity training, and even given her a short sentence in county jail. Hearing that made me feel a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because there were finally consequences for her behavior, but sadness because it didn't have to go that far if she had just respected the law in the first place. The officer also mentioned that the store had asked for my permission to use the security footage from that day as part of their employee training program to help staff learn how to handle aggressive customers and protect service animal owners. I agreed immediately, knowing that it could help prevent something like this from happening again. As for Max, he bounced back quickly from the incident, though I made sure he got an extra long walk, his favorite snacks, and plenty of love that same evening. When we went back to the store weeks later, it felt completely different. The employees greeted me warmly, some even stopping to ask how Max was doing, and a few customers gave me nods or small smiles of recognition. Max seemed to notice too. He walked with his head a little higher, his tail wagging with confidence, as if he knew he had become a bit of a local hero. Thinking back, I still wish Karen had learned her lesson without hurting anyone, but maybe this way the impact is greater. Her story had spread, both online and around the community, and hopefully it served as a clear warning. Interfering with a service animal isn't just rude, it's illegal, and it can have serious consequences. At the end of the day, kindness is free, but cruelty can cost you more than you ever imagined, and in her case, it truly did. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Unfair Stories, because here we tell the stories the world wants to hide.